you want to talk about the issue of the influx of asylum seekers, asylum applicants into Ireland, and the impact that that is having in terms of social cohesion and things like that.
Yeah, so I actually listened to, I think, a news talk one of the mornings. They were speaking. They didn't name who they were talking about, but they said they've been speaking to a government minister who said the big challenge this year is going to be social cohesion. So like they were setting it up nicely, like day one, 2023, really. First thing to bring your attention to is the record homeless figures that we have in the state at the moment. This is the backdrop of the issues that's happening. People are they're being brought out on the issue of migrants coming in, immigrants coming in, sorry, and it's causing trouble in society. We've seen protests in numerous places. The commonality seems to be that they all end up in working class places as well. So the Minister for Housing said that he's disturbed by protests held outside the centre in North Dublin suburb where migrants were being housed. Videos emerged on social media showing a crowd of people gathered outside a building in Ballymun where families were living, chanting "Get them out." One person was seen holding up a sign saying "Ireland is full." He said people have a right to protest, but in the appropriate way. They don't have a right to intimidate people. We've been a welcoming country, and rightly so. We know from our own history what it's like for people to have to leave their shores due to oppression, war, and famine. He's claiming the vast majority of people living in Ireland are here. They support the efforts to look after their friends from the Ukraine and indeed other countries where people are fleeing war. There's around 1,500 Ukrainian and asylum seekers arrived in Ireland over the Christmas period, and despite a government pledge to stop housing people in tented accommodation, 88 people were in tents in County Clare last week. 19,300 asylum seekers have come into the state, with 51,955 Ukrainians. So there's a huge pressure coming into the state, and I just have up on the screen, Finbar, here as well, just the different narratives that's out there. So on one hand, you have somebody like Matt Cooper who's able to speak in maybe a mildly, critical type of a way to ask how are we managing this crisis. Now, I made the point before that there's only a select few people that seem to be able to talk about this and not succumb to the dangers of the cancel culture. So he's able to ride it out there and make a few remarks on it. You see Francie Malloy from Sinn Féin up in the north, giving you the background which I would 100% understand in terms of our own history and what we had here with the genocide, famine. I don't know if this picture equates to what's actually happening at the moment. I don't think there's people coming in on boats because they're safer than the land. I'm not sure that's it just rolled that one out really, like and then you have this other strange situation where there's a story coming out about we can expect to see people coming here because of climate change. So we got all these other reasons and it's all filtering into the same space, which is really bizarre, like, because
to my mind what we're actually seeing is something that's akin to modern day slave networks of sorts. Now, I'm not saying that these people won't get paid, but in terms of how they were networked, and there's human trafficking on a massive scale going on, organized by governments through a global agreement, which is commonly known as the Marrakesh Compact or Marrakesh Agreement, which is the Migration Compact, which Ireland has committed to, and which most countries, many countries around the world have committed to, but the United States is one country that refused to commit to it. And it regularizes migration. It talks about making it safer and things like that. But ultimately, it's about taking the pressure off Greece and France and Spain. That's one thing. And so Ireland has to take its fair share in Europe. But secondly, and I fundamentally believe that the mass majority of people that are coming into Ireland, and we'll look at some figures in a minute, are economic migrants, and they tell you that themselves. And I've met them and I've befriended them and I know where they come from. And when I've seen interviews by people recently who've spoken on camera and said, no, we've come here and we were encouraged to come here. Our Irish government has taken every possible step to encourage this crisis. And the result will be that neither the people who are here prior to the crisis Now, the people who arrive due to the crisis will actually in any way have an improved quality of life. Instead, what I believe we're going to see is a collapse in all of our systems, which have been creaking and breaking for a while now and couldn't cope anyway. Let me just look at some stats to reveal the reality of the numbers that we are talking about. Now, remember, only a few years ago, Ireland's population was 4.5 million. Got up to around 5 million, we've been told now. Where's it going to go if this continues? So just have a look at these stats with no consultation with the Irish people on this. So here's the first stat. Altogether, PPS numbers. So this comes from the government department. PPS numbers issued in 2022. So these are personal social security numbers that you can access services in Ireland with. 286,186. Phenomenal number in itself. Just a wee closer look there in the corner. 286,168. Move on to the next one. Of those, many were Irish. 64,721. 64,007. So let's just balance these numbers out and take 60 from 280,000. That leaves us with 220,000 people not from Ireland were issued with PPS numbers in the last year, in 2022. Let's look at how many of those came from Ukraine. Of those from Ukraine, there was 65,000. We'll balance it out again to 60,000, and we'll take that off to 220,000, and that leaves us with 160,000. So in 2022 alone, Ireland issued 160,000 PPS numbers to people who are not from Ukraine and who are not from Ireland. That's a worrying figure. We're not talking about 5, 10, 15,000. We're talking about massive numbers. And if that were to double itself again this year, which I've got a fear it will, and that's what their intentions are, that means that the following year, between this year and next year, we have almost 500,000 new people coming into this country with our services in bits, with no houses for the people who are here at the moment, no homes. And my dread is that there's an economic crisis coming, a recession coming. It's the warning bells are going on across Europe and across the United States. And if that crisis comes and jobs are lost and we go into a recession, we now have to cater for an extra 500,000 people. And just from a practical point of view, to me, the whole thing is insane. And it's not serving anybody. It's not serving the immigrants who are coming in. It's not serving the genuine asylum seekers. It's not serving anybody. Do you have any take on this, Padraig?
I do, and I think it's summed up well by a commemoration, an extract from a commemoration that I read from the 1916 societies, which was just in the last few days. It was a commemoration for Fergal O'Hanlon and Sean South. So I'll just give you that. It's just a small little bit here. So in the past few days, overcrowding in our hospitals and the latest homeless statistics have broken all records. We have an emergency housing, homeless and rental crisis, a dysfunctional health service, an education system barely able to function, and the soaring cost of living crisis pushing more people into poverty and despair. The Free State government are delighted that the only issue that got the people out onto the streets in anger was an anti-immigration protest. It's likely that the next election will be fought on the issue of immigration, not the real issues which affect people's days in their daily lives, and not challenging neoliberal government policies over 100 years. Basically what they're saying, and I would agree with it to a point, that this is a big issue with the immigration, people coming in, services for people. We can't ignore that. Like, we have to have provisions for people coming in, or else what are we bringing them into? But it is true, and we made the point in the first article about the prospect now of a protest on the health issue. But we're not coming out on anything else. It seems like people are coming out on this issue, and there are right-wing groups which are taking advantage of it and are building their base based on it, and they're misleading people as well, which I don't like to see on the streets. So really, we've got to fight the government on all the issues where they're letting us down. And not just focus on this one, because this one turned so ugly, and we've been flagging it every single week. And I would tend to agree with the analysis on that. Let's not just look at this one issue as the big overriding thing society. And what I see an awful lot of, it's dedicating an awful lot of the conversation at the moment, where there's other crises.
One of my concerns is, if I'm genuine about it, is that it will be an fait accompli in a year's time or 2 years' time. If you know what I mean. I don't want to ever envisage a situation where we start sending people back. We start deporting masses of people in 2 or 3 years' time. A halt has to come to this now until we reassess everything. As I said, I believe that the majority of people coming are economic migrants, but that they've been encouraged to come, and that they're coming from countries that we have destroyed and robbed for centuries and continue to do so, or that we suppress in a way to ensure that they can't have an economic independence themselves. And as that, I go back to the point that it's a type of a slavery in a way, moving masses of people around the world to suit rich people's objectives. And that's what this is here. If we get a load of, if there's really such a demand for new workers, which we're told there is, that's not going to benefit me or you from the point of view. It's only going to benefit the rich guys to keep wages low and to get loads of. I'm not going to benefit from the fact that some guy is a factory down the road paying people absolutely nothing and not paying to the state hardly either. And you know what I mean? It's going to just impact me when I go to access services. That's all that's going to do to me. And that's the reality of it. And I know people, this is not about the quality of human beings as individuals, as a race, as a culture, nothing like that. Not for me, and I know it's certainly not from you. But there's some real practicalities here. And if people like you and I don't acknowledge these things, acknowledge them and try to address them, then the far right are going to take over. You know, and we have seen them making some headway. And when I say far right, I mean people, this is what I mean by far right. So I have 2 far rights in my mind. The first far right would be the extremist based in the ideology of 1930s Germany, believe in exterminating races or enslaving races, all that kind of jazz. There's that far right. That's the far right that exists in places like Ukraine at the moment, if I'm honest about it, and that we fund and that we arm and things like that. But there's another type of far right in my mind, which has a conservative leaning on social issues, which is fine. That doesn't make you far right. But has an extremist right-wing economic agenda hidden behind that. And that's the type of far right that I see developing in Ireland to a degree, that are linked to European parties, that are linked to Nigel Farage, that ultimately would like to see everything privatised in Ireland and have a very Trumpist Americanized attitude towards privatisation, worse than the ones we have already. And so there's, to my mind, there's 2 far rights rising. There's one that will use this anger in the community. They will use that as a way to gain support, while the guys at the top, in reality, their objective is to implement economic policies for their buddies and to go to an extremist neoliberal economy while they're conservative socially. And so that's the 2. So there's that extremist ones. I don't think most people in Ireland fit in with the former description in terms of believing that races are completely unequal and things like that. But I do see rise in the latter. You've any taken that, Padraig?
Yeah, I do, and Finbar, just on the point where if we totally overwhelm our systems here, like people won't be going back. Like that's not an option. Like that, like think about what that would mean. Like I can never see that. Like and I don't think anybody who comes here in good faith and is brought in and taken in should be sent back, to be honest. Like, I mean, once people are in, you must treat them 100% equal. The question of whether we should be bringing that many in is a fair question. Like, I don't think we are set up here.
Oh God, far right.
It's the truth. Like, I mean, that's the situation, isn't it? Like, I mean, you've got
the bigger picture is we're not allowed to talk about so many things like this. Well, you're allowed to talk about it, but you'll be attacked. Well, you're not. You wouldn't get it on in public sphere having this discussion like on RT or something like that. They'd very, very closely orchestrate and choreograph.
Well, Roderick O'Gorman was quoted this morning on the radio as he thinks we can't take anymore. You know, so like they say it when they want to say it themselves.
Yeah. Well, we have, and it depends what audience you're talking to too, doesn't it? You'll go to the EU guys and go, oh yeah, we'll take more. Double standards, definitely. Just finally on this subject, there's a class issue here as well, isn't there? There have been cases in the past, rare cases, where they've attempted to open asylum centres in posh areas, and it hasn't worked out very well because the posh people just went to court and had it stopped. Here's one case as an example: a Residents' Fight Centre for Asylum Seekers. This is from 2001. A doctor, a dentist, a barrister, and 2 engineers are among a group of residents who have taken a High Court challenge to proposals to locate a reception centre for asylum seekers in an unmarket area of Dublin. Brock House, Nutley Lane, Ballsbridge, was formerly owned by the Franciscan Order and operated as a student-hosted and religious centre. The judicial review proceedings have been taken by a group of 12 local residents with addresses at Nutley Lane, Nutley Avenue, and Ellen Park, Ballsbridge, Dublin 4. Ooh! Mr. Justice O'Higgins yesterday granted leave. So what essentially happened in this case was these guys objected, saying that the building had a change of use and required planning permission for that. And the judge upheld their application, and so the asylum centre was stopped. There's 2 points to be taken from this. First of all, the class issue, that you never now hear about any attempt to put asylum seekers or economic immigrants, whatever you want to call them. You never see any attempt to put them into posh areas. There's plenty of big buildings in posh areas, lovely big Georgian houses, but you never see that in Dublin 4 and places like that. You only see it in places like Ballymun, where the people get upset and they come out, and then the people in Dublin 4 can point at them and go, oh, look at the riffraff, look at the right-wing riffraff. And so that's the first point from this story. The second thing that I take from this story is that, hold on a minute, there's loads of buildings that are offices and ESB offices and this, that, and the other, hotels around the country. Well, not hotels, but other buildings that are suddenly being used to house migrants into the country and asylum seekers. And have they applied for planning permission and changed their purpose? Because if not, maybe they're not fit for purpose either. And there's another issue. Again, the quality of what we're taking people to, because I've seen video footage from inside the ESB building and other places, and it's horrific looking.
Yeah. There's been schools as well, I think, recently. I think there's a school in Drimna, I think, that they were using. It was a hotel in Ballymun. It was an ESB centre in East Wall. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, an awful lot of these, like, would they not be subject to the same laws? Is a fair point. I think Malachy Steens made that point the first week of the East Wall protest, that it was blocked over in D4 already. So, but listen, if they want to try and lead by example in terms of social cohesion, well, then of course they should be going in more affluent areas. Why shouldn't they be?
Yeah.